Welcome to The Hidden Load, the podcast where we uncover the unseen weight carried by the educators and leaders in medicine and explore how to lighten it. I am Dr. Santina or Tina Wheat. I am a family physician, an educator, a leader, and a coach. Each week, we will dig into the challenges that often go unspoken, from burnout and boundaries to purpose and identity to figuring out sustainability, and share practical tools to help you move from chaos to calm and from burnout to balance. Because the hidden load does not have to be yours to carry alone, and in fact, shouldn't be. Let's get started. Welcome back to The Hidden Load. I am your host, Dr. Santina Wheat, and this is episode number 13, a quick peek at Imposter Phenomenon. And to shed light on this topic, I am pleased to welcome Dr. Kristine Ellis. Dr. Ellis is a board-certified family medicine physician and a family medicine residency program director who is based in Long Island, New York. Raised in Queens, she earned her medical degree from Ross University and completed her residency in New Orleans, where she fell in love with Mardi Gras and has proudly ridden with an all-female crew since 2018. Mary, I have to come watch you do that. Mary's clinical passions include reproductive health, gender-affirming care, culinary medicine, and obesity medicine. What a spread. When she's not working, you'll find her sipping strong coffee, which we might see today, riding her Peloton, reading a good book, or playing board games with her husband, Johan, and spending time with her two dogs, Henry and Arnold. Welcome, Mary. I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Thanks for joining me. So today we are going to talk a little bit about imposter phenomenon, and particularly as it relates to being a first-generation female physician. And before we jump into that conversation, I just want to level set and put us all on the same page and define what imposter phenomenon is. And that is the original term that was coined by psychologists Pauline Rose Clance and Suzanne Imes. They chose phenomenon to emphasize that it's a common, though often distressing experience and not a pathological condition or syndrome in itself. We do use the term often today of imposter syndrome, and they're often used interchangeably. And it really does refer to the same set of feelings, and they often have to do with self-doubt and the fear of being a fraud. Okay, so as you know, Mary, I think that we all carry a hidden load, and I think that that load can be lighter when we share the load and aren't isolated in the experience of it. So can you share with us what your hidden load is, particularly as it relates to imposter phenomenon or syndrome?
Yeah. Thank you, Tina. So actually my hidden load started long before I became a doctor. In high school, I was told by the guidance counselor when I had mentioned I wanted to go into medicine that I should be a physician assistant instead, not a physician.
Wow.
Yes. And then when I was in college, my advisor then again told me that it would be really hard for me to get into medical school. So, I didn't really have any doctors in my family. Most of my family, especially my mom's side, are nurses. And my mom, who is also an incredible nurse, my whole life, I've watched her in the hospital. I grew up going to the hospital, watching her work in the emergency room. And then she became a nurse practitioner. Was a very crucial role model in my life. And so she had wanted me to go into nursing, just like everybody else in my family. So needless to say, my parents were both shocked when I kept saying, well, I want to go to medical school. They were supportive of me, but they really couldn't help me through the process and guide me. So I really had to figure all of this all on my own. So in medical school, I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me. Most of my classmates were also from families of physicians. So I had to push myself really hard, and I had no idea I didn't know how to get through medical school or even like what residency was. But I managed somehow to get into my dream family medicine residency program. However, even during residency, I felt so lost, right? I watched my colleagues. I happened to be the only girl in my class. When I matched, it was with 6 other boys and me. They were very confident throughout residency, and I kept thinking to myself, how did I get here? Right. So I never really gave myself credit. And I always thought, all of this, everything that happened to me was all pure luck. Even after residency, when I became an attending, I continued to feel the same way. Like I felt like a fraud to the point where I never really felt like I advocated for myself, right? I didn't negotiate salary. I never asked for more. I thought like being humble in that way was the answer. And that mindset took me even further into my career in academic medicine. And even now, as a program director, I still feel it sometimes, that quiet
Mhm.
voice that keeps telling me, do I really belong? So that's my hidden load, right? It's that weight of being the first physician in my family, the only one still, and feeling like I'm the one that has to still learn where my what my place is, right? It's that imposter phenomenon that you just mentioned. It
Mhm.
doesn't go away. It just feels like there's new ways that it's showing up, even though I've achieved so much in my life at this point.
I feel like some of what you just described, so many of us have had at least pieces of that along the way. I feel like I barely know a person in medicine who doesn't share the story of a college advisor or a high school advisor being like, "Oh no, you're never going to get into medicine."
Mhm.
And I can't understand how they're still advising people. I don't understand how that continues to happen. I was told the same thing. I was told I would never get into medical school. Yet here we are both today.
Yeah.
How did it feel to go against sort of the pathway that was there with the women in your family? How did it feel to take a different adventure?
It felt rebellious. I also was told I was being rebellious. There were times when my mother would say, I work with a lot of physicians and they work so hard. And, she told me, I don't want you to be like that. I want you to be able to have a family. I want you to be able to have time for yourself. And so, there were many times where, again, I kept second guessing myself and my decision of wanting to be in medicine. And I think what really pushed me through that was wanting to continue this legacy of the very strong females in my family, of my grandmother and my mom's mom. I kept looking to her also. And even though she never went to college herself, she finished elementary school, she was a mom to 6 kids. I think that's what pushed me to say, actually, you know what? My mom was also a rebel because she went into nursing and, her mom wanted her to follow in her legacy of having a large family, of being a
Mhm.
stay-at-home mom, and she herself was a rebel by going to nursing school. So, there was those parts of me that were saying, like, I can continue that even though, it wasn't the trajectory for my mom.
It sounds amazing. And how does your mom feel about it now? She proud to have a doctor in the family?
I mean, obviously, she's very proud. She's, still to this day, still telling me, "See, you're tired. You work too much. I told you." But obviously, she's very proud of her daughter. My whole family is. My grandpa, who's still alive, talks about me and that, oh, that's the doctora. He's
Mhm.
94 years old, and when he thinks about me, he always says, "It's the doctora in our family, right? That's her."
And it's great. Tell me a little bit about what you have found to be helpful for you as you've
Mhm.
navigated this process, this load. And also, maybe are there things that have not been helpful that have been
Yeah.
counterproductive?
So, Tina, like conversations like this, having the space, first of all, has really helped me. And having a tribe of like female physician friends
Mhm.
who've really supported me throughout the years, who've carried the same thoughts and struggles. And we've had like honest conversations about imposter syndrome. We've talked about feeling the same way. I think that having that space and that connection with other females who look like me also
Mhm.
has helped me the most. Just knowing that we have shared experiences in medicine, especially, has been really grounding for me. Knowing that I'm not alone has made a huge impact, and especially, learning from women like yourself. Seeing you especially has been super inspiring for me to know that you've gone through this and you've found a platform for females like myself to be able to speak on topics like this that we would have probably never spoken about before years ago, like when I was in medical school or, in residency training. I really find this motivating and affirming to me to see females like you in leadership.
Thank you for that. And I think that it's hard because some people might say, "Oh, well, we've done it. There's enough females in medicine. There's enough females in leadership," but the data just doesn't support that.
Yeah.
The data won't support that, in my opinion, until it's even, until we have as many
Mhm.
females in medicine and in leadership as
Yeah.
are in our general populace. And yes, we're doing better in family
Mhm.
medicine than in some other specialties, but this is true, I think, across all specialties. And
Yeah.
so being able to show up and being at the table for each other is really important.
Yeah, and just also I think knowing that there are coaches like yourself, like other physician coaches, like I never knew any of this stuff existed. I knew that coaching was an option. I had done coaching with a personal coach a few
Mhm,
years ago, but she wasn't a physician, so that helped me in a different way. But knowing that there are physicians like yourself who are trained to help other physicians has also really helped me deal with imposter syndrome. And I think just like naming like the feelings, just recognizing that imposter syndrome exists has helped me as
mhm.
well. Right. And saying that out loud, that this is the imposter syndrome talking when I find myself saying things or not saying things. Right. It's given me the space to challenge that.
I think that is really important. When we can identify it, we can really switch
Hmm.
our mindset about it, or we can
Hmm.
change how we're responding to it. Do you think that there were things that you did that um, you were trying to do that you found weren't really helping, that you would tell other people not to try?
Um, Probably trying to outwork those feelings by like taking on more work,
Mhm,
saying yes to everything that came in my path, right? Felt to me, I think, counterproductive,
mhm,
and also I used to think that just by keeping my head down and staying humble, like that I'd finally feel worthy of myself, that I'd finally recognize myself. And then I realized that I actually made the load heavier
mhm.
by doing that.
Yeah.
Right, so even to this day, I still have to feel like I have to constantly tell myself to advocate for myself, to celebrate my wins,
Mhm.
right, and to believe that I've earned, my seat.
I think that's really important. I think that one of the biggest mistakes I made as a physician, and I've watched people around me make, is feeling like you have to say yes to everything.
Yeah.
And I do actually think that was guidance I received at the very beginning. It was like,
Mhm.
say yes to everything, and then people will see that you're worthy, essentially, was
Mhm.
the guidance that I was given.
Yeah.
And while I do think there is truth to the sometimes the projects that you're gonna take on at the beginning are not like your heart passion projects.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that you have to overwhelm yourself in the
Yeah.
process. It doesn't mean that you have to say yes just because somebody asked you to.
Yeah.
Sometimes that boundary of protecting yourself and of being able to say, "I don't have capacity for this right now,"
Mhm.
or even, "I think this other person would be better at this than
Yeah.
me," can really show others that you are great at what you're doing and remind yourself that you can put yourself first,
Yeah.
which I think is one of the important things
Yeah.
about imposter phenomenon. You and I are both program directors and so are interacting with trainees on a daily basis. How do you see this show up for your trainees who maybe identify similarly?
I definitely see this, it would show up a lot, in my minority female, like, trainees. A lot of them have shared even during, like, interviews, during residency interviews that they felt imposter syndrome, during medical school, and they've talked about it with me and have expressed that they feel like they're qualified, they feel like, they're smart, but they still questioned, again, whether or not they belonged, because
Hmm.
they don't see a lot of role models that look like them, even in
Hmm.
residency programs when they're interviewing, they're looking at faculty members. Um, I've had those very authentic conversations with them as a PD because they see me and they want to know my story. So, I think that's early for them, and I think I give them a lot of props actually when we have conversations like that during interviews. I say, "I'm very proud of the fact that you're able to talk to me about this during a very important time in your life, because I don't think I would have been able to do that,
Right.
when I was in their shoes." Even when I asked them, "So what can you bring to this program? They still kind of feel very not confident in talking about themselves. Right. So
Hmm.
that's interesting to hear is that they know that they're aware of it, but then they still can't pinpoint what are their strengths, but they definitely do see a lot of their weaknesses in themselves. And when they do get to residency, I do see that that continues. I see it in some of my current trainees that they'll
Hmm.
hesitate to answer questions during didactics, right? They always kind of look around. I could see them like I know that they know the answers. They'll second guess themselves, when there's leadership opportunities, when things like that come up, especially for chief residents, right?
Hmm.
They don't see themselves as leaders amongst their peers, even though their peers do see them as leaders. And I do find that most of the time, those trainees are the ones that are, fearful of administration, right? Especially when they receive feedback, right?
Hmm.
They take it very personally. And I've seen it really shake their confidence, to the point where, it's hard for them to grow and develop during residency, right? When they
Right.
get feedback, sometimes, especially when it's negative feedback, it really does affect them. So, I think they're like excelling quietly, right? With self-doubt all the time. So, and I definitely see that as a program director during those feedback sessions.
So then what do you do to help them? How do you help them through that process?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I like to think I do very well, especially with those trainees in particular, is being very honest and creating that space of authenticity and seeing that, sharing my story, right, and connecting with them in that way and saying, even though I'm the program director, like I name it when I see it, I let them
Mhm.
know. I'm very honest with them and make sure that they feel that they're not alone, right? That we can create or recreate their narrative in a different way. And so I want them to know that I'm consistently advocating for them in spaces where they're not being heard in our system, in this system where administration is not supporting them. That I think in itself really helps them to know that this person who is in a leadership role sees them,
Mhm.
is essentially fighting for them and caring for them.
How do you find yourself balancing that with when you do need to be the program director? Like for better or worse, sometimes we're the bad guy in our
Hmm.
jobs, right? I joke about that, though I'm not really joking quite often when I say when they get called into my office and there's generally a problem. Like I try to avoid it for them because I know about this fear of feedback. Sometimes, particularly when you are first generation yourself as a program director, or in both of our cases as women of color,
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
sometimes can identify in ways that some of our other faculty members can't.
Hmm.
So, how do you find yourself navigating that? You have to be the bad guy at times or be the stern one with also trying to provide that advocacy and support and authenticity that maybe others can't help them with.
Yeah, I think that that's tough, Tina, but I think the fact that I've been intentional about creating that culture where they feel seen, heard, and they feel valued, it doesn't feel like they're being judged or looked down on when I do have to give constructive feedback. I think because of the fact that I'm very open about sharing my story with my trainees about how difficult it was for me to even get to this space, right? And then
Mhm.
to become a program director in itself, right, didn't seem like something that I would have ever been able to do, right? Just from like how I was told I couldn't even be a doctor. So I think that like changing that culture to yes, they recognize that I will have to give them feedback that doesn't feel good, but knowing that they're safe,
Mhm.
like, while they're getting it, I think is, like, for me, has been, key, right, to seeing them develop and taking that feedback and actually using it and not feeling fearful of that feedback.
And I don't know if you feel this way, but I sometimes feel like there's this extra little load for us as educators,
Mhm.
particularly as the lead of the programs, to watch that happening with other
Hmm.
people, like
Yeah.
to know that this is what's happening.
Hmm.
And sometimes you provide the feedback, sometimes you do all the right things and find the safe spaces, and
Yeah.
they're still a little bit stuck.
Yeah.
And so I do feel like that in itself is also a load of just trying to help others through this.
Yeah.
It's a journey, this like
Yeah.
difficult journey, and watching them struggle when you want to help them not struggle.
Yeah. It's definitely a fine balance, I think. But I think with the female trainees, you feel more connection with them. There have been moments where like we've cried together and I've cried with, my trainees giving feedback, and that's okay. And I think showing vulnerability on my end as their program director, as their mentor is okay.
Mhm,
And I think for me, like that's definitely a big change from like how I was trained and how I was given feedback as well. So I think that being able to get to know your trainees and the generation that they're in and understand that things are different, but just
mhm,
making sure that you give them that sense of that you're here for a reason,
mhm.
right? And I'm here to provide that. I'm just that vessel to make sure that I create opportunities for you, right? Because along the line, someone saw that in me as well. Like someone believed in me, right? And so it's my turn to believe in you.
Thank you for sharing that. So, obviously, you've gone through a lot in your career and in your journey to get here. And I think that all of us have these lessons that we wish that we would have learned sooner, or that maybe someone would have shared with us sooner. Are there things that you can really point to that you wish you would have either learned or heard sooner that you think can help
Yeah.
learners out there or your teammates out there?
Yeah. I really think for me, I wish I had learned earlier that I wasn't alone in this journey. I've always, for so long, put myself on this little island, thinking that I was the only one that was feeling this way. Right. So it wasn't until after residency, actually, that I started connecting with other female physicians like yourself who were carrying the same doubts and the same hidden load, right, that you talk
Mhm,
about. And so that sense of community really changed so much for me. I think, especially when I became an associate program director and
mhm,
connecting to other female physicians who were in GME. Like I never thought it would be that easy to just talk to somebody, that I met on a Facebook group,
right.
right, who would give me advice on how to do this job, right? So I wish that I had known that so much earlier, like especially even during residency, right? That I
Mhm,
wasn't alone in that way. So it might seem small, but that really did change a lot for me, feeling supported by women from places I had never even met, like even you, I had never met you in person, right? And I felt supported by you. So, and that there are resources out there,
mhm.
right, for women like me to help develop myself, um, which helps me to develop my trainees.
I think that's so important because I think one of the worst parts about imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome is that it feels so isolating. It really
Mhm,
is that you
mhm,
feel like you're not good enough to be where you are, and you
mhm,
think everyone else is.
mhm,
Getting that everyone else has either having that thought right at that moment or has
mhm.
had that thought at some other moment. And it's not all bad, right? Like it is good to have a little bit of stress and motivation to help us
Yeah,
get where we are,
yeah,
but to do it in a way that you don't feel isolated, to find that community as you're
yeah,
going through it, to be
yeah.
reminded that you're not the only one that has had self-doubts. Are there other things that you want to share that you wish you would have known sooner?
I wish that I had learned to speak up for myself earlier.
Mhm,
Right, and that was tied into that imposter phenomenon, right? Especially when I graduated from residency and I became an attending and then stepped into leadership roles to train residents. I used to think that I had to answer the way that, my directors or my bosses wanted me to, right?
mhm,
Or that being a people pleaser was key to keeping my job or getting promoted, right? Just saying yes, right? Even though that meant burnout eventually, right? But I learned eventually that my opinions did matter, right? That I could speak up, that I was an attending, right? And I was no longer a resident, right? So that I didn't have to belittle myself or shrink myself because of someone else's expectations. And questioning what I want
Mhm.
and staying quiet about it really only adds to the load. So, that was one of the biggest lessons that I had to really learn for myself. And especially as a program director, right? That's what I have to role model for my trainees, right? Being able to speak up, but in a professional way, in an elegant way, in a way that is useful for everyone, the faculty, for the staff, right? So you really have to find that middle ground of who you
Mm.
are as a leader, right? I had to also identify with that, and just knowing and teaching them that their voice matters, right? And they don't have to wait until they get out of residency to start owning that space.
It's interesting to me that you're sharing that you had to find that again, because when we started this conversation, you talked about how you were the rebel, right? Like it was the rebel for you to go into medical school and to
Yep.
do this path that nobody else had done. And so you clearly have that drive and that force within you, but there is something about medicine that makes some of it get pushed to the back and you have to find it again to be that authentic you.
Hmm. Yeah, you're right. Because I think that even as a child, I always kind of thought I was a rebel, but going into medicine and seeing others, I think, is what kind of like made me retract that
Mhm.
rebel side of me. But now that I've found ways to challenge this imposter syndrome in a positive way, in a good way, with all the resources and my women tribe, I'm finding that she is still there and has always been there. I just needed to find a way to get her out.
Well, I'm glad she's coming back out. That is great for both you and your trainees. So I just want to have a few thoughts about imposter phenomenon, just so that we all have some information to help us fight this within ourselves. I just want to mention that a couple of key characteristics, if you are wondering if you have imposter phenomenon, are the inability to internalize success and also a belief that your achievements are just due to luck, as we heard Mary say earlier, that they're due to timing or to fooling others. And there's also sometimes this persistent fear of just being exposed as a fraud or being not good enough. And then also, this is one that I feel like we see in medicine a lot is the perfectionism. There is a perfectionism and overachieving, and then also this tendency to downplay your own accomplishments, this inability to celebrate your wins and feel like they're not important or they're just to be expected. And that is one I will say that in just about every client that I've coached, that is something that we've talked about. Almost nobody is able to celebrate their wins when they come and chat with me. And it's now something that I make everyone do. I even make my faculty do it at the beginning of all of our meetings. It's still hard for everyone, but I still try to encourage it. There's also these feelings of self-doubt and inadequacy. And then the sense of attributing all of your successes to things that are outside of your own control and outside of your own competence, which seems just silly when you are a leader and an educator because you've worked really hard to get where you are, particularly in medicine. So I'm not sure I know anyone who is great in medicine that hasn't shared some of these feelings at some point along the way. We've talked a lot about women today, but my male colleagues as well have also had these problems. And so I just want to help share some strategies that we can use ourselves and that we can help our learners and teammates use. So there is a book called Own Your Greatness, and this is written by Dr. Lisa Orbe Austin and Dr. Richard Orbe Austin. And in this, they provide a framework of 3 C's. They give you the 3 C's of clarify, choose, and create as a strategy that can help you get rid of imposter syndrome and overcome self doubt. So the first C is clarify. And if you have imposter syndrome, it's more than likely you have negative stories that you're telling yourself. And so in this phase, you're going to tell yourself a different story. So you can understand your own origin story. We got to hear Mary's today about how she got into medicine. You can know what your triggers are that send you into that self doubt. And then you can reflect. And this is the recommendation that they give is to write an expressive letter of how you're feeling and why you feel this way. Then the second phase, after you've clarified and understood why you are where you are, is to choose. And so the choose phase is about taking steps to get rid of the imposter syndrome. So it involves speaking your own truth, recognizing what your strengths are, silencing those negative thoughts that we all have, and working to combat perfectionism, which, if I'm honest, is the hardest part for me. I think that everything needs to be perfect. So you have to speak your truth. You have to recognize what you are good at and celebrate those things. When you have self doubts, you need to go through steps to silence them and change your mindset around them. And then you need to work to be okay with not everything being 100% or getting rid of that perfectionism. And of course, that's hard to do in medicine, but it's something that you can do. It does not have to be perfect every time. Then the final phase is to create. And so this really looks at a lot of what Mary was talking about, and because it's designing the conditions for your optimal performance. So the first is to maybe try different things. Maybe it's trying different styles in your role or taking on new job opportunities. But the second part of it is to establish your dream team. And that's a lot of what we heard Mary talking about today. To have people that are around you that are going to support you. If you have the ability to do that at work so that it's not just in your tribe outside of work, then that can be really helpful. But making sure that that team is around to help you silence those self-doubts, to help celebrate the wins with you, and to help walk through some of the challenges that you're having so that you can look at it from another perspective. All of those things can be helpful in helping silence the negative aspects of imposter phenomenon. Okay, Mary, after all of that, is there anything else that you want to add about things that are helpful?
Yeah, I think it's also important for people to know that saying that you have imposter syndrome or imposter phenomenon doesn't mean there's something wrong with you, right? It often gets framed as something that's negative, but I think for me, it's been really just a reflection of how deeply I care, right? And
Mhm.
how I'm trying to grow in the spaces that I thought weren't built for me. And that's my story, right? And so, like you've shown, Dr. Wheat, there's ways to navigate it. And the first step is to naming it, right? To saying that
Mhm.
out loud and owning that feeling is how you start to work through it. So that was the hardest part for me, I think, was recognizing it and admitting it out loud.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And it has been such a joy to have you chatting about this
Yeah.
today. Is there anything else that you want to share with everyone?
So, for my trainees or anyone else that's listening, I do want you to know that it takes time to work through these feelings, like I've shared, but you don't have to be alone, like Tina said, with the support of your dream team, your tribe. That's what I call mine, who truly care about you. You'll find your voice and you'll realize that you belong. And I do just want to share that with my trainees that, you'll learn to own your story, not just live it.
Absolutely. Now, Mary, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
So I do have a professional Instagram. It's Dr. Kristine, Kristine with a K. And I do a little bit of dabbling with mentorship myself, but specifically with international medical graduates. I do have a website, prettydeterminedinc.com. So I've throughout the years of being in education have really also held space for international medical grads, FMGs like myself, who are also alone, who are navigating this system on their own. I've been able to help a lot of trainees get into to programs of their dreams. So
Thank
just
you
paying
so
it
much
back.
for doing that and for sharing that. And we will have Mary's contact information with the Instagram and
Mhm.
this email in our show notes so that you can go back and find that if you're listening while you're driving. And thank you so much for joining today, Mary. It's been a pleasure. And for everyone who is listening, we're so glad that you joined us today and hope that you know that if you are having self doubts, if you are facing perfectionism, if you think that you might be experiencing imposter phenomenon or imposter syndrome, then you are certainly not alone. And thank you for showing up today and carrying this hidden load with us. Thank you for joining this conversation with Dr. Mary Kristine Ellis and I about imposter phenomenon. We will definitely come back to this as a topic in future episodes. But next week, we are going to talk all about how we can help support struggling learners and teammates. Talk to you then. Thanks for joining me on The Hidden Load. Tag me on Instagram at Dr. Tina Wheat or email me at santina@santinawheat.com with your takeaways and ideas. Don't forget to subscribe, and until next time, let's lighten your hidden load.